Good evening. We are in 2 Kings chapter 11. And we are dealing with the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel, Athaliah, who married the king of Judah because he allied himself with their house, with the house of Ahab and Jezebel, and he was killed by Jehu, because remember he was there with Jehu, and he was destroying Judah, and Judah had been following the Lord and being faithful to the covenant for a couple generations, and now they went the total opposite direction, right? But yet his wife was a daughter of Ahab, and she then went on this, Ahaziah is dead, so what she did was she decided to destroy the entire line of David. Now, where did she get that idea from? Now, you could say, well, she was just trying to consolidate power for herself. But her husband is dead, who is a son of David, from the bloodline of David, and now she's tried to wipe it out. And what's incredible about it is that she almost accomplished it. That she got so close in carrying this out, and you wonder how she did it. Many of the soldiers probably did not know that Ahaziah was dead. Okay? And might not have known, because you wonder, why would they carry this out? Well, she's now the queen. She stepped in on an interim basis because there was no older heir. But there was a bunch of, children and cousins, and still there was a bunch of men with the bloodline of David. So she tries to consolidate and wipe them all out and take control herself. See, why is it so important? Because if Joash was not saved, and she wiped out the line of David, that would nullify the covenant. That would nullify the Messianic covenant, because the Messiah come from the body of David. Wasn't that the covenant? Yeah. Right? So you see how close she came? Well, of course, the Lord, allowed it to go so far, but of course he had other plans. But you see that demonic attack was to destroy the line of David. And you wonder, well, remember, the enemy is not all-knowing.
But he did have the Old Testament, right?
He had the scripture, but when this happened, he didn't have it. This was written afterwards. Right?
Yeah, but wasn't there a prophecy that said something about
He has the Davidic covenant.
Right.
He knows that the Lord made a covenant with David.
So that's, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And through that, he knows that that the line now was from the seed of the woman would destroy him, right? The specific seed of a woman, and then of course through Abraham, through Isaac, then through Jacob, and through Jacob's 12 sons. Jacob laid his hands on Judah, and then said the scepter would not depart from Judah, so that was Judah. And then David was from the line of Judah, and then of course he was given the covenant that a ruler will come from David who will reign on the throne of David forever. Right? So the Messiah this figure would come through the line, not only now from the tribe of Judah, but from the line of David. Everybody see that? Mm-hmm. So what is the devil doing?
Studying the Bible.
He's following what God has said.
Yep.
And he's trying to destroy it and nullify it.
Better than a
See, you have to remember I told you this last year, the devil is not all-knowing. We have this Taoist symbol in our mind of God and the devil. Well, it's not that way. The devil is a created being, used by God. He is separate from God, therefore he's separate from truth, which means he's without the Lord, he's lost. He's 1,000,000 times more powerful than we are. But he's no match for God. It's not like it's a good fight.
Amen.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
But yet, he's trying to nullify the word of God. He's trying to destroy what the Lord had. And the Lord uses him as his tool to sift us. And of course he used him to sift Israel and to sift the people of God. He always has. Right? So of course he's trying to wipe out the line of David, but of course the Lord won't let that happen, will he? But it was a major wake-up call for the people of Judah, because Amaziah had torn them down again and allied himself with the two most wicked people there was, right? And married their daughter and brought her and made her queen of Judah. Imagine that. All right? So, but the high priest Jehoiada took Joash. Now there was, there was an attendant, a nurse who heard what was happening, and she took Joash and she hid him and she brought him to the temple to the high priest Jehoiada. And of course he was a baby, so he can't really be a king as a baby, can he? What's interesting is they couldn't wait any longer, so they made him king when he was 7. So he could walk and talk, and that was about it. Right? So he's a baby, but he obviously they can't do anything when he's a baby. Right? So they let this go, and they have to protect him. They have to protect him, and they have to build a whole setup and for him to come back. So Athaliah takes control, and they let this go for a while. And of course, she is does out of her way to destroy every remnant of the Lord, right? But she's not powerful enough to expel the temple and the priesthood, because the rest of the Jews, you could say Jews at this point because it's in Judah, would not go for that, right? So, but Jehoiada waits till he's 7, and of course he trains him himself, right? And he's in the temple with the priests, and then one day he calls all the leaders and all the elders together, and the leaders of the army, and he calls them. The high priest is calling. And remember, in Israel, especially in Judah, the high priest is still a very powerful position. There's the king, but there's the high priest, right? Calls them all together, and they're all wondering, has the throne of David been distinguished? Extinguished. Extinguished? Has it been destroyed? And of course, then he shows. You look at all movie lines and all these stories that people have made. You can't get better stories than this. So he shows a son of David, Joash. And of course, imagine the people's reaction. They cheer, he doesn't have to convince them. They go crazy, and they turn on Athaliah in a second, right? And, but what's interesting is Joash was only 7 years old, imagine that. But he was old enough to walk and talk and be king, so that was it. And of course, Jehoiada guided him as the high priest, and he looked at Jehoiada as a father, right? So, I'm just imagining a little there, he's sitting on the throne, he's a 7-year-old, a big crown, and must have been, very cool. Because you look later on, Josiah becomes king at 8. All right? So, now, Joash, so Athaliah comes in, and of course she starts into the temple. She starts screaming treason, but then Jehoiada just points and says, deal with her, take her outside. And of course, they put her to death. But what's interesting is no one was loyal to her at all. See that? He didn't have to fight any guys. Nobody was fighting on her side. It was just, they know what she has done. So Joash becomes king under the guidance of Jehoiada, high priest, and he guides him, and Joash becomes a very righteous king. He destroys all the Baal stuff that his father had done. He gets rid of the idolatry and wickedness and starts to bring the people back and rebuild. It says to rebuild the temple because it's all run down and falling apart. And he finds out that the money, the priests aren't using the money in the proper way to rebuild the temple, and the temple's falling into ruin. And we get more of this in Chronicles, and he really charges Jehoiada and them to take to really make a separate offering that they do just to rebuild and to repair the temple, because it was falling into buildings. If they're not up, doesn't matter what they are, eventually they have to be kept up, right? So anyway, there's a lot more to that in Chronicles. And what's interesting, though, is this very detail. Joash served the Lord faithfully all the days of Jehoiada. And when Jehoiada is gone, he totally changes. Now we get more details in Chronicles. He's actually mentioned by Jesus at some point because he did something very evil. And later on when he was old. And this pattern, remember I told you there was this pattern of them serving the Lord faithfully when they're younger, and then when they get old and set in their ways and arrogant, they go crazy. And it happens so many times. Well, that happens to Joash. He for the prime of his life, he was a faithful servant of the Lord, son of David, a benevolent king under the authority of the Lord, guided by the high priest Jehoiada. And then when Jehoiada dies, he changes and does something wicked. Now, one thing that's interesting is that Moses was the last person to live to 120. And the Lord said man's days will be 120. He made that, except for Jehoiada lives for 130. And you're like, well, no one else even came close. But it was the grace of God. Why? Because Joash needed him. Because he had no guidance, and the Lord knew what would happen without him. So the Lord let Jehoiada live till he was 130. And then Jehoiada dies, and Joash is an older man now, and he slowly starts to slip into a sinful behavior and slips away from God. And even to the point where, now I'm filling this in from Chronicles, okay? Jesus mentions this story, but you have to know the names and you have to know the Chronicles story to know this part, because this part isn't in here. All right? What happens is that Jehoiada's son, okay, Zechariah, sees how King Joash is starting to let go of all the things and not holding up the Torah and letting idolatry come in and all this stuff, and he goes to confront him as the high priest. He goes to confront him and to try to get him to turn back, because this is a man who knows what he's doing, and he's just gone the other direction. And he is the son of Jehoiada, and you would think that he would have respect for him, right? His father saved him and raised him, right? Well, Joash actually says, "Who are you to talk to the king like that?" And has him executed in the court, in the palace. It says, this is the high priest, the son of the man who saved him, took care of him, and raised him.
So it sounds like the only person that Joash answered to
was Jehoiada.
Yeah. Once he was gone.
And the Lord let him live an extra amount of time. Now, Jesus mentions this story in a way that most people don't catch. He says, "For you, this generation were responsible for all the blood shed, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah, who you killed in between the altar." Right now, Berechiah is interesting because we know it as Jehoiada, but actually another one of his names in original Hebrew is used in Chronicles is Berechiah. It might have been a nick or something in Hebrew that meant specifically having to do with him. A lot of times there's more than one name, and it confuses us. But actually, if you look at a lot of us, we have more than one name. We have nicknames, and we have things that people call us. And I mean, people get real confusing. One in the New Testament is Peter. A lot of people get confused with that because it's Simon, and it's Peter, and it's also Cephas. Right? And you're like, because in Paul's writings it's Cephas, and you're like, who's Cephas? Well, Cephas is Peter. Who's Peter? Peter's Simon. Simon, Cephas is actually just rock. Peter in Greek. Peter was, the transliteration from Hebrew, which meant rock. Simon was his name. He was called Simon the Rock, Simon Peter. Interesting. He's got 3 names, but there's different languages. Jesus gave him a nickname meaning Peter, the Rock. Okay? And then in Greek, in Paul's letters, that's all the New Testament is Greek. In Greek, for rock was Cephas. So he's talking about Cephas, and you're like, you don't know who he's talking about unless you know that. But he's talking about Peter. See that? So we have, there's lots of things that we have that. Anyway. Let me try to remember. Is there anything else part of that story? There's more to it in Chronicles. And see, like I told you before, we're going to get to Chronicles. Chronicles focuses on the kingdom of Judah. And you get a lot more details about the kings of Judah and the things that happen in Judah. It tells you what's going on in Israel, but just a little bit. Just the main points. Whereas Kings seems to focus a little more on the kingdom of Israel. See that? All right. But in this story, there's a lot more. There's the whole thing. So Jesus actually mentions that this story in how because Zechariah, son of Berechiah, was the son of Jehoiada, who King Joash had murdered in the temple. All right? You see that? So I know we probably all heard him mention that in the Gospels, but you got to know the background to know what he's saying. But he was sending you to this story. Okay, so isn't that, I mean, like an incredible, I know it's not here, but it's sad, and it's hard to handle that, to see how he could go such the opposite way. But that's what happened towards the end. But imagine how long he was king. He became king when he was 7. 7 years old. And he managed to be a faithful and righteous king for, 30, 40 years. Wow. Then Jehoiada was gone. And he changed. And it didn't change immediately, like the day he was gone. But over time, he started to slip into, selfishness, into yourself. And that's what happens. Jehoiada was guided him, but obviously he was following Jehoiada, not following the Lord. Right? Because when Jehoiada was gone, it wasn't about him and God, it was about Jehoiada's God. Right? Anyway, now the thing about the repair in the temple and using the money for that and seeing how they were using the money, that was all here. That's in the end of chapter 12, right? But it doesn't give you that whole part of it that I just told you. Okay, verse 19. Now the rest of the acts of Joash and all he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah? And his servants arose and made a conspiracy and struck down Joash at the house of Millo. And as he was going down to Silla, for Jozachar, the son of Shimeath, and Jehozabad, the son of Shomer, his servant, struck him, and he died. And they buried him with his fathers in the city of David. And Amaziah, his son, became king in his place. And if you're wondering about that, well, he was killed. And some people turned on him that were close to him. And part of it, it's safe to assume, is because they all got sick of him. And because of what he did was he killed the high priest. Doesn't mean what these guys did was right, because that's still right. But anyway, it doesn't mean that they're fine and what they did was justified. The point is the Lord allowed it to happen because Joash had the covering of God, but he lost it at the end. Right? Okay. Anyway, so that brings us to chapter 13. Amaziah. All right, now, if you notice that some of the names, they get doubled up, and there's different ones, there's different Jorams, there's different Amaziahs, right? And you're getting a little confused. Well, remember, it's the same language in Israel and Judah, and they use the common names. I never was in a single class in school in my life where there wasn't 2 Michaels. There was always 2. Okay? We think of Jesus, of Nazareth, but we forget that it was actually, his name was Yeshua. Yeshua was a very common name. There would have been thousands and hundreds of thousands of them everywhere. It was a very common name. It was Joshua. Right? So, anyway, the point is that it's the same here. That's why there's a lot of the common names. In the same language, you have a lot of the names that are similar. Right? And you name after your father, your great-grand. That was always the custom. So that's why you see... So you get a little confused with, wasn't there already an Amaziah, or wasn't there a Joram? Remember, at one point we had a Joram in Israel and Judah. All right? So, okay. In the 20th year of Joash, the son of Ahaziah, King Judah, Jehoahaz, the son of Jehu, became king over Israel and Samaria, and he reigned 17 years. Now we're jumping back to Israel, carrying 2 separate timelines, right? And he did evil in the sight of the Lord and followed the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. And what is that? Yep, he set up the 2 calf idols, one in Dan and one in Samaria, and said, this is Yahweh, right, who brought you out of Egypt, and he let people just be priests, so they mixed the Torah in with all this horrible idolatry, right? So whenever you hear the sin of Jeroboam and they did not depart from it, the king was immediately in rebellion unless he would deal with that. Which he had made Israel sin, he did not turn from them. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he gave them continually into the hand of Hazael, king of Aram, and into the hand of Ben-Hadad, the son of Hazael. And Jehoahaz entreated the favor of the Lord. Jehoahaz entreated the favor of the Lord, and the Lord listened to him, and he saw the oppression of Israel and how the king of Aram oppressed them. And the Lord gave Israel a deliverer. His grace, that they do these things and they cry out to him and he saves them again. For how many years now? Hundreds and hundreds of years? After what they do, and then they cry out to him and he delivers them. So that they escaped from under the hand of the Arameans, and the sons of Israel lived in their tents as formerly. Nevertheless, they did not turn away from the sins of the house of Jeroboam, which he made Israel sin, but walked in them. And the Asherah also remained standing in Samaria. For he left to Jehoahaz of the army not more than 50 horsemen and 10 chariots and 10,000 footmen, for the king of Aram had destroyed them and made them like the dust of threshing. Meaning, you see that they did, that means they lost over 90% of their army. It was wiped out. That's pretty bad. Yes. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoahaz and all that he did and his might, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Jehoahaz slept with his fathers, and they buried him in Samaria, and Joash, his son, became king in his place. See how the names? Now there's a Joash in Israel? Yes. In the 37th year of Joash, king of Judah, Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz, became king over Israel and Samaria, and reigned 16 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, and he did not turn away from all the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which he had made Israel sin, but he walked in them. Now the rest of the acts of Joash, and all that he did, and his might, which he fought against Amaziah, king of Judah, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? So Joash slept with his fathers, and Jeroboam sat on his throne, and Joash was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel. When Elisha, now this is a very interesting story, verse 14, when Elisha became sick with illness of which he was to die, Joash, the king of Israel, came down to him and wept over him and said, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel. Now, what we don't exactly know what that saying is, but they always say it. It's like a way to honor the men that are dying that you see in that way. I don't exactly know, but you see that many times. And obviously, it was a cultural thing of respect, right? And Elisha said to him, take the bow and arrows. So he took a bow and arrows, and they said, take the king of Israel. I love this story. He goes down to see him, and he's dying. He's with the king. And he wants to leave the king, a blessing of some sort, although Elisha has been at odds with the kings of Israel because of the calf idols, right? But yet still has a heart to turn them back to the Lord. So he tells the king to shoot an arrow. Okay? And he listens. You notice there's always something that he has you do as a step of faith, right? To proclaim and grab a hold of the word. There's a lot of prophetic lessons in that. Put your hand to the bow, and he put his hand on it, and Elisha said, lay hands on the king's hands. And he said, open the window toward the east, and he opened it. Then Elisha said, shoot, and he shot, and he said, the Lord's arrow of victory, even the arrow of victory over Aram, for you shall defeat the Arameans at Aphek until you had destroyed them. And then he said, take the arrows, and he took them, and he said to the king of Israel, strike the ground, and he struck it 3 times and stopped. But Elisha was annoyed at him. Because he only struck it 3 times. Because now he's showing him, okay, go. And he wanted him to be zealous, right? But he wasn't zealous, and he kind of just did it 3 times, like kind of just to appease him. So Elisha's upset with him and says, you should have struck it more than that. You're only going to get 3 victories now. You're not going to completely go all the way. Verse 21, and as they were burying a man, behold, they saw, now this is following 2 timelines, remember. And that's what gets confusing. Because you're going to see then, when they go back to a different timeline, you're wondering, now Elisha's gone, but they're jumping in the future because it's written with hindsight to tell you what happened in a story with Elisha's bones. That was much later, right? So they're kind of jumping into the future here to tell you this story about his bones. It all just didn't happen in 1 week. You all get that, right? Okay, and as they were burying a man, behold, they saw a marauding band, and they cast the man into the grave, and a grave of Elisha, and when the man touched the bones of Elisha, he revived and stood up on his feet. Okay, which is an amazing story, of course. It's incredible that the Holy Spirit had so infused. Remember the double spirit, right, that he received, a double portion of the anointing, had so infused in his body that his bones, literally, just still had so much of the presence of God that this dead person fell on them and came back to life. It's an awesome thing, but the Holy Spirit, like Peter's shadow, healing people, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome. So they jumped into the future there just to tell you that story. But it's an amazing story. Okay. So I am wondering if I skipped something. Where Haziel was stopped by... Did I skip something? Where Haziel is stopped by Elisha, and Elisha cries because he sees what he's going to do. Did I go through that story last time? I did, didn't I? I'm having a hard time remembering. Where Elisha, says, "Go back and tell him that he'll live, but he won't live. I know he won't live, and you will become king." And then Elisha starts to cry and says, "Because I know what you will do to Israel, and how you will destroy them, and how you will." You remember that? And he goes back and he suffocates his king, and he becomes king. Did we not get to that yet? But hold on a second. All right.
Do you remember it? I don't remember it.
No.
All right. So did I skip it?
You must have.
I must have skipped
He
it.
doesn't remember.
You sure we didn't get there yet?
I think we should have gotten there yet, and that's a story that I like to spend time on, and I'm wondering why I didn't talk about it. Yep, that was all the way back in chapter 8. I knew, I was thinking about this because Haziel is in the next breath here. Then Haziel attacks and Elisha dies. And I'm thinking, did I ever talk about that? In chapter 8, Elisha... Yeah, I did. Now I'm remembering that I did talk about it because I reminded you that the Lord spoke this to Elijah. But now Elisha is the one who was anointing... remember he said, and anoint Haziel to be king over Aram? And you're like, why would he do that? But because the Lord was going to use Haziel to persecute and to destroy Israel, to turn them back to God, to try to, right? To punish them.
Okay.
Go back to chapter 8 quick, verse 7. And Elisha came to Damascus. Now Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, was sick. And he told him, saying, the man of God has come here. And the king said to Haziel, take the gift in your hand and go to meet the man of God and inquire of the Lord by him, saying, will I recover from this sickness? Yeah. I did talk about this. Yeah. So Haziel went to meet him and took a gift in his hand and every kind of good thing of Damascus. The good things of Damascus, 40 camel loads, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, then Elisha said to him, this is verse 10, go say to him, you shall surely recover, but the Lord has shown me that he will certainly die. And he fixed his gaze steadily on him, and he was ashamed, and the man of God wept. And Haziel said, why does my Lord weep? Then he answered, because I know the evil that you will do. The sons of Israel, their strongholds you will set on fire. Their young men you will kill with the sword, and their little ones you will dash in pieces. And their women with child you will rip up. Great thought, huh? Then Haziel said, but what is your servant who is a dog, and how should he do this great thing? And Elisha answered, the Lord has shown me that you will be king over Aram. And he went back and he smothered the king and killed him and became king. And of course, then he became the number one persecutor and destroyer of Israel many years later. But the Lord appointed him as punishment for Israel. Now, think about this. Remember, I've said to you how many times I was going to show. The reason why I was wondering if I said that, because going back to Elisha's bones here, and you see Hazael, in verse 25, right after this, the end of 13, then Joash, the son of Jehoahaz, took again from the hand of Ben-Hadad, the son of Hazael. So that's what brought me back. I was like, did I ever really get into that? Hazael was chosen by God to do those things.
Right.
Doesn't mean that the Lord said, this is what I want you to do. The Lord knew that this was a wicked man. Right? And the Lord but used that wickedness in him to punish Israel. And he was called out and spoken of. Elisha was given three things. Elisha, son of Shaphat, will be your successor. Will take over for you as prophet. Anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, to be king over Israel, and he will deal with Ahab's house. Right? And Hazael to be king of Aram. Now, of course, Elijah tells Elisha, because Elijah only does one of them, trains Elisha. He tells them these two other things, and then Elisha is the one who anoints Jehu, and then eventually meets this guy Hazael, and when he meets him, the Holy Spirit reminds him, and now he sees, yeah, he's the one, and he tells him what you're going to do. See that? See how that prophecy was given, and the Lord gave those directives to Elijah, but it didn't happen for years later, and it was passed on to his successor to carry it out. Much like the Lord gave the prophecy to Moses about what would happen to the Amalekites, but it wasn't until Samuel and Saul where the Lord said, okay, now I want you to do it. Remember that? Generations later. So anyway, that's why I wanted to bring that up, and I wasn't sure if I had really gotten into that. But again, that was just another example of the Lord is in control, and the Lord still controls the nations, right? And that he used the wickedness of this man Hazael to punish his people. See that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Back to 14. It ends with Hazael dying, and because Hazael was at war with Jehoahaz and defeated Israel and got their army down to nothing, lost 90% of their army. Okay. Chapter 14. In the second year of Joash, the son of Jehoahaz, king of Israel, Amaziah, the son of Joash, see, another Joash, king of Judah, became king. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Jehoiadin of Jerusalem, and he died right. And he did right in the sight, I said died right, and he did right in the sight of the Lord, yet not like David his father. He did according to all that Joash his father had done. Meaning, he listened to Torah, he tried to follow the law of Moses and implement it into the land. But what does that mean? His heart wasn't in it. He wasn't fully given and devoted in devotion to the Lord like David and like Hezekiah. Right? Or Asa. He went through the motions. Only the high places were not taken away. The people still sacrificed and burned incense on the high places. Now it came about as soon as the kingdom was firmly in his hand that he killed the servants who had slain the king his father. But the sons of the slayers he did not put to death, according to what is written in the book of the law of Moses, as the Lord commanded, saying, the fathers shall not be put to death for the sons, nor the sons be put to death for the fathers. Each shall be put to death for his own sin. So, that's in there because he took that seriously. Why? Because the custom would be for rich and powerful men, especially kings, through all of time, was you and your whole family for what you did. Right?
Right.
But of course he didn't do that because he was honoring the Torah and God's law that goes against it. Alright, so pretty awesome. Okay, verse 7. He killed of Edom in the valley of Salt 10,000. And he took Selah by war and named it Joktheel to his day. There's a lot about him in the book of Chronicles. And he was taking back much of the land that had been taken, which was like a lot of it, a high percentage. And because he had really reestablished the strength of Judah again. And then Amaziah sent messengers to Joash, the son of Jehoahaz, son of Jehu, king of Israel, saying, "Come, let us face each other." But now he's gotten arrogant. And Jehoash, king of Israel, sent to Amaziah, king of Judah, saying, "The thorn bush which was in Lebanon sent to his cedar which was in Lebanon, saying, Give your daughter..." Now, I'll just explain what this means. What he's saying is that he's the cedar and you're the thorn bush, and you want us to be equal and come out in battle, but you're like, he's... Just because you've had a couple of victories, don't think now you can just come to me and then you're just going to crush me like that, you know. It's pretty much calling him a joke. I know it's in very descriptive, weird, poetic language, but in their vernacular, that's what it is. It means, you can see it, that he's the cedar and he's the thorn bush, and the thorn bush has no right talking like that to the cedar. Right? And he says, give your son in marriage, because that is the token that all kingdoms, even up until the modern industrial age, the sign of a king would make an alliance or something with another king by giving a daughter in marriage and intermarrying, right?
Yes.
He's saying that he's got no place to be on his level. Right?
Right.
Okay. And of course, he's right, because Amaziah has become proud now. The Lord has given him some incredible victories, and now he's attacking Israel, and he doesn't need to attack Israel. He just wants to. He wants to show off, and he wants to establish his authority. He's gotten that full of himself. Okay? But 11, but Amaziah would not listen. So Jehoash, king of Israel, went up, and he and Amaziah, king of Judah, faced each other at Bet Shemesh, which belongs to Judah, and Judah was defeated by Israel, and they fled each to his tent. And Jehoash, king of Israel, captured Amaziah, king of Judah, the son of Jehoash, the son of Ahaziah, at Bet Shemesh, and came to Jerusalem, and tore down the wall of Jerusalem from the gate of Ephraim to the corner gate, 400 cubits. And he took all the gold and silver and the utensils which are found in the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king's house, and hostages also, and returned to Samaria. Because Amaziah became proud and started a war which he had no business starting, and God did not appoint for him to do. Right? Sad day. And he lost because of it. And he was warned not to. He should have backed off at that point.
Yeah, he did.
Verse 15, now the rest of the acts of Jehoash, which he did, and his might, how he fought Amaziah, king of Judah, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? So Jehoash slept with his fathers and was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel, and Jeroboam, another Jeroboam, you say? Yes. His son became king in his place. 17. And Amaziah, the son of Joash, the king of Judah, lived 15 years after the death of Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz, king of Israel. And the rest of the acts of Amaziah, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And they conspired against him in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish, but they sent after him to Lachish and killed him there. Then they brought him on horses, and he was buried at Jerusalem with his fathers in the city of David. And all the people of Judah took Azariah, who was 16 years old, and made him king in the place of his father Amaziah. He built Elath and restored it to Judah. And after the king slept with his fathers, in the 15th year of Amaziah, the son of Joash, king of Judah, Jeroboam, the son of Joash. See, they're constantly giving you two timelines. But here, he didn't last very long, Azariah. He wasn't king for a long time, and he didn't do a lot of great things. But there is a little bit more detail about all of these kings when we get to Chronicles. In the 15th year of Amaziah, the son of Joash, king of Judah, Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel, became king in Samaria, and he reigned 41 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, for he did not depart from all the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which he had made Israel sin. He restored the border of Israel from the entrance of Hamath as far as the sea of Arabah, according to the word of the Lord, the God of Israel, which he spoke through his servant Jonah, the son of Amittai, the prophet who was at Gath Hefer. Now, is that the Jonah that we know of Jonah? And yes, it is. He was a known prophet. And remember, he knew what the Lord was saying. He just wasn't happy with God for saying it. He didn't want Assyria to get a chance to repent. Remember? Well, you haven't done Jonah yet in Prophet's class. You will eventually. You have done it? Jonah? You did do Jonah.
Yeah.
So you remember, Jonah, it's not that Jonah was a well-known prophet. He fled because he knew God was loving and merciful. That's why he didn't want to go. He didn't think they deserved an opportunity at repentance. He was mad when they repented. He was mad at God for giving them mercy.
He was a racist.
Well, see, he had witnessed the Assyria dominate and destroy Israel, and he felt like the Lord he felt that they did not in any way deserve forgiveness. But see, the Lord gave an opportunity and sent Jonah to do it extremely reluctantly. And of course they repented. And the thing about the story, which I love, is the fact that Jonah actually knew the love of God and the grace of God, and he didn't like it. He didn't want him to do it. It's just such an opposite of what we would think, because you think, oh, well, we're always thinking how harsh the Lord is. Well, Jonah thought the Lord was too nice. Amazing story, huh? For the Lord, verse 26, for the Lord saw the affliction of Israel, which was very bitter. For there was neither bond nor free. Choking a little bit here. Nor was there any helper for Israel, and the Lord did not say that he would blot out the name of Israel from under heaven, but he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam, the son of Joash. So the Lord delivered them again. Why? Because he couldn't let them go. Now eventually they are exiled, and we're going to get to all of that. That's coming. Verse 28, now the rest of the acts of Jeroboam and all that he did and his might, how he fought and how he recovered for Israel Damascus and Hamath, which had belonged to Judah, and they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. And Jeroboam slept with his fathers, even with the kings of Israel, and Zechariah his son became king in his place. Chapter 15. In the 27th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, Azariah, the son of Amaziah, king of Judah, became king. He was 16 years old when he became king, and he reigned 52 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Jechaliah of Jerusalem. And he did right in the sight of the Lord. Isn't it nice every time you actually get to see that? And he did right in the sight of the Lord, according to all that his father Amaziah had done. Only the high places were not taken away. Now, by and large, there was more righteous, God-fearing kings in Judah than there was rebellious ones. In Israel, they didn't have a righteous one ever. They all clung to the sins of Jeroboam, thus all nullifying the covenant.
There's more good ones in Judah?
In Judah. Well, you have...
Bad, I mean?
There was more good than bad.
Really?
Well, you consider Solomon was half and half, right? Obviously, but the kingdom split after Solomon, so it starts with Rehoboam. Rehoboam was bad. His son was bad. Then we have Asa. Then we have Jehoshaphat, right? And then after him we have Joram, who wasn't good. But then we have, then you add up Joash, Josiah, Hezekiah, Asa, and a couple of these guys that aren't very well known, Uzziah, this guy here, I can't think of his name, all of a sudden it's failing me, Azariah, who's also Uzziah in Chronicles, okay? There's a lot more about him. When you add them all up, when you add them all up, there's a couple more that were actually, now, like there was two that got he did right in the sight of the Lord, but not like David. Yeah. There's a couple of those, meaning he went through the motions, but he wasn't living in horrible idolatry. He wasn't poisoning Judah. But he wasn't clear in his devotion, right? But all in all, there was about 5 or 6 very wicked kings. Actually, 2 of the most wicked ever, which was Ahaz and Manasseh. We'll get to them. Right? But there was more actual righteous kings in Judah than there was wicked ones. Okay? But in Israel, why it's skewed is because it's about, you'd say 7 or 8 righteous and 5 bad in Judah. In Israel, it's like 15 out of 15 or 20 out of 20. Jehu was the only good one, but Jehu did not destroy the calf idols. Then he put himself. He went through all of that, didn't go all the way, and still managed to bring down, it didn't turn the people back to God, so he got the same treatment. Right? So all in all, between Israel and Judah, it's still way skewed on the evil side, but but there was more righteous kings in Judah than you think. All right? Okay, anyway. So Uzziah and Azariah, it gets confusing, because in Chronicles, it's Uzziah. And there's a lot about this story there. Okay? Where how he becomes leprous and all that, that's all in Chronicles, that's not here. He actually, God makes him leprous. It says that he was a leper, doesn't tell you how in the story. So let me tell you this story. Because then when we go through Chronicles, we're just going to fly through it. Okay? But what I'm trying to do is already fill in a lot of the things that are in Chronicles that are not here. In this one, there's a major one. Okay? Also, when we get to a couple of other guys, there is too. So, Uzziah was a righteous king. He served the Lord. He was actually well known. He followed after his father, who was a king. He was the one who went through the motions. It says he did right in the sight of the Lord, but not with not as David. But he had a good example as far as following the covenant, right? And it's interesting though how the Lord separates that. Why I always point that out is because it's interesting how the Lord has, if you do not depart from the sins of Jeroboam, you're in the same camp. Because it's rebellion and idolatry against the Lord, right? But in Judah, he's got us, did as David, meaning if you're like David, you're fully devoted to the Lord in worship and everything, right? Where then a couple of them weren't in rebellion, but yet but did not do like David did. There was one who actually did all according to David. It may have been greater than David, which was actually, in his younger years, Hezekiah. All right? But I just like how the Lord makes that distinction to let us know that, the writer here, because based on their understanding of what they saw, that, he went through the motions, but not fully like David, his father. How we get that little, so we can't put them all in the exact same boat. See that? All right. But Uzziah was, fully devoted to the Lord. He got rid of all idolatry. He brought the people fully back to the covenant, of the temple worship and the Torah observance. And the Lord really blessed him. And then one day, he gets arrogant when he gets a little older. He wasn't old at this point, but he became king at a very young age. And by the time he was middle-aged, he was very, very blessed. The Lord had blessed him tremendously. And Judah had strengthened like crazy, right? And one day he gets a little so full of himself that he is worshiping, but then he goes into the temple and decides that he was going to do the sacrifices. Somebody already tried that once. Remember Saul? Tried to go a king thinking that because they're king, they can be the high priest. Well, guess what? The king can't be the high priest, right? God was very clear about that, wasn't he? Who's the high priest? And only the sons of Aaron, period, can do the sacrifices. And that's it, right?
Yeah.
No one else. The Levites don't do the sacrifices. The Levites are in charge of Torah and observing Torah and keeping the people in observance, right? And teaching the word, and they're also the police force, pretty much, right? And they do they check what's happening. That's the Levites' job, is to enforce the Torah. But in the inner temple workings is only the sons of Aaron, right? Well, Uzziah or Azariah, depending on which one you're in. Just like what I told you when you had Berechiah and you had Jehoiada. Right? Well, that's the same here. You have Azariah, which also have Uzziah, two different names, but it's the same guy. That's why my study Bible is nice, and it gives me that little thing here. It has Azariah, and then in parentheses it has Uzziah, so you don't get confused. All right? Well, anyway, so he gets a little full of himself. He's worshiping. He's doing really good, but he gets a little too much into it, and he gets a little full of himself and decides, well, he wants to be a priest. So he's the anointed king, and everything's great. So he oversteps his bounds and goes and starts offering the sacrifices. Then the high priest comes in with and says, "What are you doing?" And he gives this pompous answer about he's the anointed, and the high priest says to him, "You can't do that. You are not a priest. You are not a son of Aaron." Blah blah blah. And he stands up and he goes in the temple, leprous. In front of all the people, the king his skin totally changes in front of all of them. And they all see it, and he falls to his knees. And he is leprous. And that's why he moves out of the palace, and he lives in this little separate area the rest of his life, and his son pretty much manages a lot of the things. So the king lives the rest of his life, Uzziah, leprous.
Pretty much the total opposite of being a king.
Yep, exactly.
Right.
But the interesting is the Lord doesn't take it away. Doesn't mean he can't be forgiven, he can't have salvation, but that's a big one. They all supposed to know that one. And they all have the story of Saul to remember it, and, right? But of course, what is the downfall always? Pride. It's always the same one. But all in all, he had that one major big mistake, but Uzziah did do a lot of good things as well. But see, we don't get that story here. You just he's leprous. But the Lord made him leprous. All right? And that's why when people say that the Lord can't give sickness to anyone, and they say, oh, well, I can't give what he doesn't have. Well, they haven't read the Bible, because who made him leprous? The Lord did.
Right.
Okay? So.
We're really blessed today because, these people are doing these things, and look what happened. Like, he made him leprous.
Yep.
And we
are at the time of grace because of the cross. Yes.
Yes.
But you have to also remember that with the anointing and authority that they have, they were held to a higher standard. You also have to look at the incredible grace he gave some of these guys that did horrible things, and yet he forgave them and gave them another chance. Yeah. We're going to wait till we get to Manasseh. You haven't read Chronicles yet, you've only read here. And in Kings, he was the worst king there ever was. But there's this whole story in Chronicles, and you get a whole nother detail that wasn't in here, how the Lord forgave him, repented him, restored him, and brought him back he was dragged away in hooks, and brought him back from a cage in Assyria and made him king again for another 20 years. So, because he repented and humbled himself before the Lord. So, one thing you always see, a lot of times you can see what they got, sometimes the punishments were very strong. But yet, what we don't see, and we forget, is how much grace the Lord gives them with so much of this stuff. Extends to them, and deals with them in their culture and all these things that they do, and yet works with them and loves them and forgives them when they turn to Him always. Now, one thing you have to remember is their mindset is something that is so different than our mindset. Now, and a lot of Christians never hear this. They never hear anybody talk like this. This is a foreign concept to them. But they don't have a biblical worldview. Okay? Meaning, when things happen to us, we never attribute a spiritual connection to it. They do. They have understanding Yahweh is in control, and Yahweh allowed the king to be leprous. He became leprous because of this, right? But see, a lot of us, we never attribute a spiritual connection to any of the things that happen. Right? Now, we're also told that the Lord said multiple times with them, said the disciples thought, well, this man sinned, is that why he's blind? And the Lord said, no, it isn't. It's the glory of God. But sometimes the one guy, he said, go and sin no more, something worse might happen to you. Right. So there was all different ones. And we don't know. We leave that with the Lord. We don't know why, when we're all told that bad things are going to happen. That we can't go through this life without having bad things, and each day has enough trouble of its own, so let tomorrow worry about itself. Jesus' words, right? But the point is, they always saw, especially when it came to the leaders and the kings, the Lord allowing, like the evil spirit came on Saul, but it was an evil spirit from the Lord. Why? Because the Lord allowed the king of Israel to be possessed. So it was from the Lord. You see that? See, it's their mindset. Which is different. We don't attribute any spiritual cause to anything, do we?
No.
So, now, there's many times, can it be in a demonic attack? Yes. Can it be just the way things work out because we're in a sinful, cruel, horrible world where we're told that everything is corrupted?
Yeah.
Yes. Can it be God intervening and punishing?
Yeah.
Yes. Which that's one we'll never say and we never give anything to except for the fact that it's real.
Right.
Right? And the Lord disciplines those He loves and those He's accepted as His Son. So, the discipline of God is real. I felt the discipline of God in my own life. Meaning times where, I could feel the Lord's hand trying to wake me up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Has anybody else ever felt that?
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Is it always pretty?
Nope.
Is it nice? No. But you have an opportunity to turn to Him or get bitter and get colder. You only have those two options. Right? So, anyway, the grace of God is extended the fact that the Lord continued with them over and over again, even through the midst of all this stuff that they did. Even in His incredibly detailed Torah that He gave them, and they just spurn it and don't even know it, to the point when it gets to Josiah, and they don't even know it. They never even heard it before. You guys got to Josiah, right? So that's at the end of 2 Kings. I had you finish it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you saw that they tear his robes and he goes, what? The curse of this book? But how could the king of Israel and king of Judah and the high priest have never heard of it before? How could it get to that point? Right? So you see that the grace of God extends through them through all that. The fact that He didn't bring on the curses of the book of Leviticus on them after the first generation, since they already did all the things He said. Right? But He didn't. Okay, so. But also, it had to be what King Uzziah did, or Uzziah, had to be a strong example. And you saw that the Lord uses examples. This was an example that a king has to know that he cannot do this. There was one other example happened before with Saul. Been many generations since then, but Uzziah seemed to forget that. But why is that such a big deal to God? Because if the king, the Lord did not want all the power and authority in one hand. The Lord gave the high priest a certain power and a certain authority. Right?
Yeah.
And if the king could step in and take it, he would destroy the temple and destroy God's design. Only through Messiah, the prophecy of Zechariah and Isaiah, that the Lord would restore the two offices of king and priest. You see that when you get to the prophets, right? So Uzziah majorly slapped God in the face publicly in the temple here. Okay? And so it had to be a strong answer to what he did. Okay. So that brings us to verse 8. In the 38th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Zechariah, the son of Jeroboam, became king over Israel and Samaria for 6 months, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord, as his fathers had done, for he did not. So is it the same one with all of them? Why did they do evil? Why did every king of Israel, does it say that? Because they did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had made Israel sin. It's the same every time. They get an opportunity, and they can either turn away from it and turn Israel back, or if they continue in it, they join it. All right? Verse 10, then Shallum, the son of Jabesh, conspired against him and struck him before the people and killed him and reigned in his place. Now the rest of the acts of Zechariah, behold, they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. This is the word of the Lord, which he spoke to Jehu, saying, your sons unto the fourth generation shall sit on the throne of Israel. And so it was. The Lord said, I gave Jehu fourth generations, and that's exactly what it was. But Jehu could have had a longer lasting blessing from God if he had destroyed the calf idols and restored them back to the Torah, right? But he didn't. He did a bunch of things and then stopped and didn't go all the way. Therefore, the Lord still had grace according to his word and gave him the fourth generation, but at that point, then it was done. Verse 14, then Menahem, son of Gadai, went up from Tirzah and came to Samaria and struck Shallum, the son of Jabesh, in Samaria and killed him and became king in his place. Now the rest of the acts of Shallum and his conspiracy which he made, behold, they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. Then Menahem struck I always mess this one up. Tipshah, there we go. But there's no SH after the S, but it's like Tipsah. It's weird. Anyway, yeah, just say Tipsah. Just say it fast. Just say it fast, and it sounds like you know what you're doing.
Sounds like you're sneezing.
And all who are in it, and its borders from Tirzah, because they did not open to him, therefore he struck it, and they ripped up all the women who were there with child. Isn't that great? You see, that was always something that it did as the ultimate way to, the ultimate cause of terror. That's what they did there. You wonder, well, why wouldn't they just kill the mother? No, they would let the mother live and do this because it was terror. It was a way to, it was the most brutal way to show, to bring people into line. You understand? I know it's twisted. You were told the Bible doesn't hide anything, does it? It always tells you the way it is. And that's what they did. Now, of course, is that evil? Yes. All right, but these were not righteous men. Verse 17, in the 39th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Menahem, I already read that part, sorry. No, I didn't read that part yet. Okay, the son of Gadai became king over Israel and reigned 10 years in Samaria, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord. He did not depart in all his days from the sin of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which he made Israel sin. Pul, king of Assyria, came against the land, and Menahem gave Pul 1,000 talents of silver, whose hand might be with him, to strengthen the kingdom under Israel. Then Menahem exacted the money from Israel, even from all the mighty men of wealth, from each man 50 shekels. Okay, so he did that, and of course he continued on in wickedness, and then his son Pekahiah became king in his place. Now we jump back to in verse 23, in the 15th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Pekahiah, the son of Menahem, became king over Israel and Samaria, and he reigned 2 years, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord, and he did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. See how it's the same time every time? See, the writer is very careful. You'd think that he would expect you just to know that by now, but he doesn't, because you have to see why did he not do right in the sight of the Lord? Why did he do evil in the sight of the Lord? Because he did not destroy the calf idols. So every king of Israel gets an opportunity, but he did evil in the sight of the Lord because he did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam. Right?
Right.
So that's why every time he's careful to say that. So can a king of Israel do right in the sight of the Lord and yet leave the calf idols? No. It doesn't matter anything else he does. Right? Because they are directly in defiance, actually doing what the Lord hates the most, which is mixture. Which is God's customs and rules and with terrible idolatry in one nice bag. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, that's 1 and 2 in the 10 Commandments.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so Now, so that brings us to 27. In the 52nd year of Azariah, king of Judah, Pekah, the son of Remaliah, became king over Israel and Samaria, and he reigned 20 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord. He did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he made Israel sin. I'm going to make sure you, in the middle of your sleep, you're going to hear, and he did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam. You have to get that. That's what this is all about. What is it? The Lord over and over and over again giving every king an opportunity to turn away from the sins of Jeroboam. It's all they have to do, but they won't do it. All right, 29. In the days of Pekah, king of Israel, Tiglath-Pileser. Now there is a famous historical name. King of Assyria came and captured Ijon and Abel-Beth-Maacah and Genoa and Kadesh and Hazor and Gilead and Galilee, which is many towns in northern Israel, all the land of Naphtali, and he carried them captive to Assyria. And Hoshea, the son of Elah, made a conspiracy against Pekah, son of Remaliah, and struck him and put him to death, and became king in his place in the 20th year of Jotham, the son of Uzziah. Now the rest of the acts of Pekah and all he did, behold, are they written in the book of the Chronicles, the kings of Israel. Now it switch back to Judah. I have 1 minute. Okay, in the 2nd year of Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, Jotham, the son of Uzziah, king of Judah, became king. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Jerusha, the daughter of Zadok. And you notice that the mothers of a lot of the righteous kings were Jewish. You see that over and over again. Right? And then, of course, we had the wicked king and then his son, happened with Athaliah, and he married a daughter of Jezebel. Now, technically Ahab was Israel, but she came from the line of Jezebel, right? But anyway, I just think that I've just noticed that from going through this so many years now. It stands out to me every time. Okay. Ahaz, the son of Jotham, king of Judah, became king. Ahaz was 20 years old. No, did I just skip? No, that's where I am, right? Ahaz. 7th year of Pekah, son of Remaliah. Yeah, that's where I am. No, Jotham. I did skip.
32.
Yeah, I did skip. In the 2nd year of Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Judah, Jotham, the son of Uzziah, king of Judah, became king. He was 25 years old. Okay, his mother's name, blah, blah, blah. He did right in the sight of the Lord according to all that his father Uzziah had done. Only the high places were not taken away. All the people sacrificed. Now, what does that mean?
He almost did.
What does that mean? Only a couple of them actually did it.
That he still served those calf.
No, this is in Judah. There's no calf idols to have the temple. The high places in Judah were places where they would do sacrifices to the Lord in these special holy places. But remember, according to Torah, only sacrifice can happen in the temple. Period. The tabernacle and the temple. Nowhere else. Now, even though they're sacrificing to the Lord, they're disobeying the word of God.
Right.
But the Lord gave them grace and saw them as righteous even when they weren't being faithful in that.
Right.
See that? They were actually breaking it, but he was letting them go and giving them mercy, but it's still mentioned here, so they know that the Lord still, because only a couple of them actually went all the way and did that. Hezekiah got rid of all the high places and brought them back to only sacrifice happens in the temple with the sons of Aaron, period. Okay? Which is why, of course, Israel cannot, they had to reinterpret the sacrificial system after 70 AD when the temple was destroyed. Why? Why couldn't they just do it anywhere? See, because of God's law is what kept them for 2,000 years waiting for the third temple. And it's all God's plan. Because they only can sacrifice in the holy place. Therefore, sacrifice was done away with in 70 AD, and they cannot reinstitute it until the third temple is built. So Judaism is waiting, and that's all about the third temple. You understand? You think that's random chance? Coincidence? No, that's God's design. See that? See, if they were allowed to sacrifice anywhere according to Torah, it wouldn't be that big a deal. But they can't. So Judaism is missing a major component that cannot be restored until the temple is consecrated again. All God's plan and design. That's why it matters so much. And that's a sneaky little thing that's in here, but it's a big deal when you consider God's plan for the last 2,000 years of the gospel going out to the Gentile nations and then Israel being restored at the end of the age. Right?
So when Israel restores the temple, they're going to want to do blood sacrifice?
Absolutely. They're already, they have red heifers and all that stuff. Yes, they do.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so we're done here. I already had you finish 2 Kings. You see, we're going pretty well here. Did I have you read anything in Chronicles?
Yes.
How much did I have you read to? The first couple chapters in Chronicles are genealogies, pretty much, aren't they?
Yes, there's oh, man.
So go to chapter 10. You're going to hit the storyline. I know this. Skim through the genealogies. Like, don't just skip it because there's some story in there, but just kind of look through the names. You can see what it's going through names. You can just jump to this part and go read the text, right? You don't have to read every single name and every single. You can just skim right through that. All right? And then it picks up in chapter 10. It gets right back in, and the story picks up where David, where Saul and Jonathan are dead. That's where the story starts. The war with Saul and Jonathan are dying, and then David becomes king. All right? So read to chapter 10. No. Read to chapter like 13 or 14 and skim through those genealogies. Okay? But you'll do it in 2 minutes. Just skim right through them. Okay. We'll stop right there. Have an awesome night.